Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome back to Connections, the ongoing series here with Sheikh Idris, where we explore trauma healing in the Islamic paradigm in relation to spirituality, in relation to healing and relationships and parenting and all sorts of things. Welcome back. So I think we're on episode 11. Is that? I
I
think we're
think
on
so.
number 11 now. So mashallah,
Yeah.
we're in the double digits. And we wanted to explore something where we often have touched upon it, I think, in previous episodes, but haven't really clarified it or expanded upon it in a more direct way. And that is the difference between process oriented uh, thinking or process oriented being versus goal oriented being, goal oriented thinking and orienting to life. And this, I see people bump up against a lot. I bump up against it personally as well.
Mm.
There's a huge kind of block I feel with many people. Maybe it's a modern thing. I don't know. Maybe it's a um, human, just general human thing. I mean, I think a lot of these different strategies that we use are part and parcel of the human experience. They're not really necessarily a modern thing or postmodern thing, or but I think, Wallahu ta'ala alam, the emphasis on doing as opposed to being, the emphasis on arriving at this fixed notion of success or this fixed goal, as opposed to allowing for something natural and spontaneous and process oriented to emerge from something within. That is going to be something that really dictates the culture and dictates the people in that culture. And I think we could do worse and explore this a little bit more directly. Um, I just had someone today who, earlier in one of my sessions with somebody, where she really struggles with having access to her kind of subjectivity. Everything is about how it will be deemed by the other. Will she be ridiculed? Will she be exposed in some way? If she allows for something spontaneous within her to emerge. And what's been really beautiful with her is that as she's allowed over the course of time a lessening of the grip of this goal oriented, what you call people pleasing today orientation, to something much more genuine and authentic and real. Not only has she been able to actually access her heart and access for her personally boundary setting, excuse me, but also she's finding herself making art. And she shared actually today in the spirit of Rabi al-Awwal some of her art, and it was gorgeous. And I was just sharing with her and reflecting. I'm like, look at what you've allowed to spring forth from yourself as you've allowed more of this connection to your heart, and this kind of releasing or this letting go of some sort of fixed notion of how you ought to be and how you should be, and the shame and the pressure you put on yourself to do that, and allowed for something more natural. You've put boundaries where you want to put boundaries, and you've allowed beauty to come. Boundaries and beauty that come from this allowing of process. And so I found that very stunning today. And it's not really something that I'm sure you see all the time. I see all the time too, is we have these rigidities of thought. And the more that we can allow what is living within us to grow down, as we say, to grow down and in and up and out, the more that we can allow that natural development of who we are to continue. And
Mm.
so, um, with that, inshallah ta'ala, I want to welcome back Sheikh Idris. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Idris.
Salam, Mazen.
Alhamdulillah. So, I know you feel strongly about this, and we've touched upon this as well. And this has so many applications that we don't want to necessarily pigeonhole it too quickly now. But in parenting and education, in healing, and life coaching, like we were talking about a little bit earlier off camera, these types of notions creep in, and they
Yeah.
totally thwart and override much of what we're trying to do when you're trying to heal and help people nourish and cultivate and develop themselves along the human spectrum of growth and transformation. So how do you see this kind of binary, if you will, of goal orientation versus process orientation? And please share a little bit about how you have bumped up against it, maybe personally, or you see people, and how we can begin to maybe shift our paradigms in a way that we can access the process in a more rich way.
Well, I think with first and foremost what you shared there, where you said, in my own personal life, in your own personal life, you've struggled with this.
Yeah.
And straight away that resonated with me, because that was, I mean, I got to such a place of high anxiety in my spiritual sort of seeking, where I just had to almost, it got so destructive, I had to let go of that. And when I reflect on that, it was always that sense of, am I there yet? Am I there yet? When am I there? When am I going to be there? And it's almost as if exactly as you said, I'm envisioning that I'm going to be in a place at some given time, and then I will be realized, I will find peace. And one thing that really, when I was going in that, and that's been very much my life, my personality type is that I'm someone that always likes to keep myself busy and occupied and moving forward. But one thing, I remember one person gave an example that really struck me, is that he said there's two ways of looking at the world. We can focus on the horizon, but the problem with focusing on the horizon is, as you walk towards it, you'll never get there. Or you can actually turn around and see how many steps you've made towards the horizon, and almost have a sense of gratitude for how far you've come. That gave me a very that was a very profound mental shift for me at that point. And I have to admit, I'm forever struggling with this, and I think we're all swimming in this water. And you were saying something very interesting, is that how did we get here? And I think that's a very important question. Now, again, it's a both and, it's not an either or. We need a sense of being goal oriented. We need to have a sense of direction. If you think about it, for us as Muslims, we have a qibla, we direct ourselves towards it, and we want to feel like we're almost moving up in our life. We say, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, you're guiding towards something. So there's no doubt that we need to have direction, and we need to feel like we're moving forward. But it's part of the piece. It's not the be and an end all. So I think that's important, that we're not dismissing goal orientation at all. It's a necessary component. But where that becomes the be and an end all, we obviously start to sense an imbalance in ourselves, where we're giving too much focus to one sphere of our life and compromising all the other spheres that need focus. So we spoke about this in the manifestation talk, I think, is that we live in a Protestant work ethic society, where the Protestants moved away from Catholicism in terms of a fatalism. There was this sense of, I think in the Middle Ages, there was and in the Enlightenment period, there was a sense of fatalism in the Catholic Church, in terms of people just like, this is my lot in life, I can't do anything about it, and this is what God's written. And so there was a reaction towards that through Martin Luther and the people after him, to sort of say, no, we have to have agency in our life, and we can almost drive ahead. And they focused on the willpower and the work ethic. And but then they went to the opposite extreme, where they forgot about the letting go. And the analogy I often give to people is, if you're sitting in the water and you're in your little boat with an oar or a paddle, there may be times when the water's completely still and you don't have any wind to take you. So you have to put your paddle in the water and sometimes be moving towards your goal, your island. But there's got to be a point where you start to feel the momentum behind you, and you stop rowing and you put your sail up and then you can almost let go and feel the momentum and move. And then but the wind might go again, and then you put your oar in again. But if it's a constant, if you in your life, if you feel that you're constantly almost paddling, your muscles, your arm muscles will give way.
It's exhausting.
And you'll be exhausted. So that's a litmus test for me is, how's your energy? How's things going for you? And do you feel like you're almost up against it, and you're having to almost grit your teeth and grin and bear it? And I ask people, like, in their day, what's the percentage of you grinning and bearing it and trying to almost push through? What's the element of you almost you can let go and feel flow and momentum behind you, almost as if something's got your back, and you're in a flow state where you're moving forward and not having to effort so much. And you're generally, so, most people would say probably 80 to 90%, they feel like they're up against it and they're really having to effort. And so that's really important for us. I think so we could look at it historically where it stems from. And I think one thing I've been focusing on a lot recently with my clients is about attention. Because what happens if we bring it into a therapeutic setting is that people want to be fixed. Almost got this urgency about them, and anxiety underlying that they want to, I'm not where I want to be and I want to be somewhere. And that's natural. Of course they feel like that, if but where does that stem from? And what I try to bring to my clients is straight away is I say to them, I educate them around attention. So when you were a baby in the very early stages of development, you didn't really have made a strong capacity, the muscle of attention. It wasn't there. You could recognize faces and you could stay with them for a certain degree. But fundamentally, how do we learn to attend to things? Like, so for example, if I have this and I start to almost explore it and I can pay attention to it without being distracted, and I can almost, contemplate over it. How do we develop that muscle? And we learn it through being attended to. So when the mother or the father or the caregiver is almost giving us undivided attention, we start to almost feel, we drink that in. And it's one of the most fundamental cravings that the infant has. They really want to be basked in that attention. And if we don't get it, this is where narcissism comes from, because you literally want to be the life of the center of attention. And you can't stand it when someone else gets attention. So I think attention, something really important to explore, is that as we start to grow, we can start to give our attention to things. Now, attention can be of three different qualities. I can give you a soft attention. So as I'm speaking to you right now, you could be almost, I'm present with you and I feel available. It's not efforting. There's almost this like, I just feel really enjoying this. I feel available and I'm drinking it in, and I feel the ability to come in and engage. So this is what we call a ventral vagal attention. A ventral vagal meaning parasympathetic, or rest and digest, feeling just available and ready to engage. That's one form of attention. And then we have another attention, which is like this, where like Mazin's come into the room and I say, oh, Mazin's here. And I say, how are you doing, Mazin? Usually around some sheikhs come into the room. We say, what can I get you, sheikh? And, is everything okay? Are you happy with the situation? Now we're in that's the willpower now. We're in a forced, intense attention. That's which we can experience mentally, and obviously physically with our eyes. We can feel the tension in the muscles behind that. Now, and that's the sympathetic, that's the fight and flight or activation. I prefer activation and fight and flight, because it doesn't mean you're actually running away or fighting necessarily. It just means you're on the ball and you're trying to attend to something with a lot of almost effort. Now, that's not sustainable. So what will happen if you, like, for example, everyone's experienced this. Say you're at an event and there's so many people around and you're like this and like this and like this. After a while, you're going to get a headache. And then what happens after? You start spacing out. So that's the default response. That's going to be the response to too much attention, intense attention. That sympathetic attention is that you go into a dorsal vagal, which is the freeze or spacing out, almost as if you just can't almost. I say your attention can't touch things. It's almost as we're talking right now, my eyes are touching your image. And at the moment, the quality is going back and forth between a little bit of intensity as I focus and a little bit of softness. So I'm going in between sympathetic and a little bit of ventral vagal as well. And it's almost as if I can feel my eyes touching you, if that makes sense. And with my attention, I'm touching you. And so it's like, what I invite people to do is assess your attention. Like, what's your attention like? And if you're spacing out, this is so important with clients, to say, if you're spacing out and start drifting off, I say, respect that. Tell me to shut up and let's explore that. The problem we make, and society forces us to do this, if you imagine that child's not received attention from the parent, or the parent had their own worries and stresses, so they couldn't attend to the child. That child comes in where their attention's fluctuating between sympathetic attention and spacing out. Sympathetic, like, so intense attention, spacing out. Intense attention, spacing out. They rarely get that almost nurturing attention where you just feel, oh, this feels good, we're engaging. And so what they do, they turn up to school, and then they're in school, and they start spacing out because there's anxieties around fitting in with other children, around, being outside, left home now, and that now they're in a new environment that they've got to adapt to. Naturally, they're going to feel intensity. They're going to be spacing out. And the teacher sees them spacing out and says, hey, Mazen, pay attention. But you can't force attention. That's the thing. If I suddenly bring attention, I won't be able to maintain that fixed, hard attention for a short period, and then I'll space out again. And so this is the biggest problem. We get caught in this bind. And another important point about this is that if the child didn't receive that attention, so the mother could have breastfed the child, they're breastfeeding the child, they're holding the child, but if they're stressed and worried, the mother, or they're on their mobile phone, or they're somewhere else with their attention, that child knows it instinctively that it's not receiving that attention, because we crave that. It's like a fundamental need. And if we don't get that attention, we live in a world of anxiety. It's almost where is it? Like instinctively, like our nervous system is like, I'm not receiving that, I want it. And we go into our adult life almost in this state of anxiety, yearning for that when I can relax and receive attention from someone. And it becomes misguided and misdirected towards things and objects and activities, or counterphobic sports, or activities where you just need the adrenaline rush to feel any sort of aliveness. And this is why we live in an ADD society, an attention deficit disorder society, because we don't receive attention, we can't give attention. That's so right. And that's what, when you're talking about schools, where you were saying we want to talk about this is a fundamental principle we need to understand, is that we can't get children to force attention, because they can't learn like that. They need to you need to invite, like, where are you at? So I'd say to Mazen, you look a little bit tired. You're just like, let's just let you sit there and just, what are you experiencing at the moment? Oh, I'm feeling a bit dizzy, a bit spacey up here. Just hang out with that, just be with that. And then, oh yeah, I feel it. Now I've given you space. I've allowed you to feel your sense of self. What happens is you just start to, oh wow, that feels good. My muscles have just like almost opened up in my shoulders and my neck. They don't feel so tight. I feel like I've come online. Oh, I can notice things in the background that I wasn't aware of. Oh, I didn't realize you had a lava lamp in the background. I didn't realize your cat was there. You suddenly come online. It's like a natural, availability that occurs. And so this comes down to all this process orientated, is that instead of being goal orientated, it keeps us in that sympathetic activation, which will naturally be counteracted by the spacing out. And you get caught in those two, like sympathetic shutdown. And what we want to do in therapy is to allow people to experience themselves. So it's and then things just naturally feel like they flow, and you get towards your goals anyway, because you've got availability for your goal to move towards your goals without the efforting.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, that was a rant.
That's what I want from you anyway. So you got it. It's that passion. It's the process.
Yeah.
No, but it's beautiful because that's exactly it. As we allow for more of that social engagement, ventral vagal, parasympathetic activation, we find the life force within us comes in and just cleans house.
Yeah.
There's a natural, intuitive, organizing force within us we call ruh, spirit. And that's what connects all of our spheres of being, brings us into the moment, helps us access our heart, and connects us to other people and to God. And what more of a goal is there? And so if we understand that, if that is the goal ultimately, to know Allah, to know ourselves, to be connected, to be in communion with our internal, with our gifts, and be able to share that in service,
Well,
there's
feel
no
God.
way.
Feel God.
To feel God, yeah, exactly. To be
and feel His attention on us. Ultimately that attention, what's it feel like to receive attention? Well, fundamentally, that's what we're getting from God 24/7. He's attending to us, but we're just not feeling it because we haven't had that, because we don't experience it in our day-to-day life. We can't give that. We're so focused on a goal orientation. I've got to get this done. I've got to get that done. I've got to get that done. Oh, I've just finished series 1 of this show, and I've got to now that it's like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Is that what happens is you just can't let go and feel almost. And fundamentally, we want God's attention, but you only can experience that when you slow down.
Yeah. And you connected that nicely to us wanting and needing our parents' attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really what this is about. When you see kids suffering with ADD or ADHD type presentations, children in grade school harming themselves or acting out in some way, or not focusing in school, whatever, not producing, not efforting, not engaging,
even misbehaving, they wanting attention,
acting, all of that is connected. It's not pathological. I get parents that come to me like, do you have something natural you can give my kid who has ADHD? I recognize that these medications may not be very helpful, and they may have a lot of negative side effects, which they do, and I want to help my child. And I tell them, first of all, you can't pathologize this. You have to be very careful not to pathologize your children, because this is a process that they're here for a reason. There's conditions that brought them here, and there's conditions that you can establish that can help them come out of this. But you have to first change your entire orientation to your child now, not as this broken machine.
I'm not looking for short-term solutions.
I'm not looking for short-term solutions, but really being able to access the subjectivity, the experience of this child. What is it in our home environment? Steiner has these kind of 4 tiers of 4 levels or spheres of a household that have to be nurturing for the child to grow and develop healthy. He has the physical space. Is it a beautiful space? Is it inviting? Is it warm? Does it smell good? Does it look good? He has the rhythmic level, which is like the lifestyle patterns, the habits, the rituals. Are we eating together? Are we praying together? Are we sleeping? Are we whatever? Are we together? And is there a dependable rhythm to life, or is everything unstable and you don't know what's going to come next? Is there safety in the kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever, the rhythmicness. And then he has the emotional relational, of course. Is there attunement? Is there presence? Is there love? Or is there pressure and shame and disgust and all of that, or abuse? And then the highest level, he says, is spiritual ethical. Is there that transcendent orientation? Is there that connection to God and to beauty and to virtue? Is that part and parcel of, the consciousness and the lifestyle of the people in the household, especially the parents, who are, it's really a top-down kind of thing. And children want it to be top-down in some way. They want to receive it. They need to be able to receive it so that they can grow down and then be able to rise up and then give that to the next generation. But that's a need. So it's not pathological. And the moment that you pathologize, you've made your child into a machine. You've unhumanized them. And this medicine has to be about, and healing in general has to be about rehumanizing people and allowing them to access their subjectivity without shame and judgment, and to see how have they adapted to these conditions that were unhealthy. It's not their fault that their parents weren't there for them. It's not their fault that there's transgenerational traumas that are coming down, that are coming in the way of their parents being present and full themselves. Never mind give it to a child. It's not their fault. The child interprets it as their fault and begins to renegotiate their entire relationship with themselves and their parents and the world and God. And that's what needs to be healed. And it's a process there, and it's a process out of there. And this is something that, I mean, process needs to be part and parcel of our spiritual orientation as well. Like you mentioned for your thing, you know, we're always looking for the high, or for wusul and arrival, and this, and it's a concrete thing, and it's about the relationship.
Yeah.
I always go back to that, because it's not about transaction. You give me this and I give you that. That's not what mu'amala, I think, really means. And it's about, you know, dinun nasiha, you know, this sincerity of presence, of counsel, of advising, of concern, of just give and take. You know, I'm invested in your process, and I see something maybe that you can't see because of your other veils and because of your troubles. And so I love you, and I see something for you, and I want to direct you. And then you feel that love and that embrace and that attention, and then you can now see that. And that's nasiha, and that's a beautiful thing. You know, even in Jannah, I told someone yesterday, I think we both needed to hear it, you know, but it's like, in some way, it's like even Jannah, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but even in Jannah, we're ascending. It's a process. So even Jannah is like, we're still growing, and we're still, you know, and it's this eternal how to purification, of enlightenment, of growth, whatever. I don't even know how to even.
It never ends, but it's not stagnant.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's not some perpetual state. It's still in growth, even.
Yeah, and it's like people say, am I going to get bored? It's like, you won't even have that problem, because you're going to be constantly reborn into a whole state of consciousness, which is anew. It's like being born again. So when you're born, it's like, whoa, everything's like amazing, you know. And it's like you're being born like every day or every Jum'ah or whatever it is in Jannah. And it's like, do you get bored of being reborn? You know, people have these beautiful experiences of rebirth here, spiritual experiences, whatever.
Well,
it's
I remember
like
with the
new eyes, you know.
I remember with Hakim, that happened with me once in a session. That with Hakim, a lot of the time when we were tracking, so most of his work with me, I was closing my eyes and I was tracking. And then I remember one particular session, I just opened my eyes and I just saw vibrancy. I was like, it was almost, and an image came to mind of, wow, this must have been what it must have been like for Adam alayhi salam when he opened his eyes for the first time. Yeah, and it's just amazing. Then you're like, oh, what was it I was complaining about? Like,
all that goes away.
What was I came, you know, today? What were we working on? And it's just like,
which is amazing, isn't it? Because in Jannah, isn't it like, you know, you're asked about in Jannah the ham and the gham of dunya, and you're like, what ham? we talk trauma. What? Are you not seeing this? Yeah. Allah.
Yeah. And what's interesting, you said there was something came up for me. A very famous hadith is where Nu'ayman, who was the practical joker and prankster around the Sahaba, who was an alcoholic. He was an alcoholic as well. He was the one that he was getting flogged for drinking publicly. And Omar basically, radiallahu anhu, is like, you know, God, this man's always getting caught. So he's having expectations of him. He's saying he shouldn't be doing this, go there. And the Prophet ﷺ's like, no, this is him. This is what he's like. And he loves Allah and his messenger despite all of this. So he wasn't trying to meet an ideal with him. He was just meeting people where they're at, still taking them to task and making them responsible. But he wasn't holding them like, when are you going to sort yourself out? You know, you've been caught 3 times now. Don't you think you need to end? You know, you don't hear that language.
There's no shame. There's no shaming. You know, excuse me. You don't hear any shaming in the tarbiyah of the Prophet ﷺ. And I find that very.
And like with Anas ibn Malik, you know, when everyone else was complaining, like he's not doing this, he's not doing that. And the Prophet ﷺ would just say, this is what Allah's ordained, you know, just leave him be. And like, people are like, what? Leave him be? You know, we need him to do this and that and this. And the Prophet ﷺ says, why do you expect something that's not going to be written? And people really struggle with those hadiths.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, how do we apply that with our children? But I do believe when there's almost a sukoon, a sakina internally with you, your children feel that reassurance, and they want to please you anyway.
That's right.
They want on a obviously not all the time, but on a grand scheme of things, because they feel that repose and they feel that tranquility within you, and you're almost in control of your own self. They are wanting to, be there for you. And so he let that thing go. He's not going to shame Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu there.
Totally.
So we see this demonstrated in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, and I've seen that myself as well, even in my own process, where I wanted agency. And I could think back to my teenage years and high school and college years and see what I was doing to try to find some sort of control in my life. And not always finding the healthiest modes to apply that. But I can see now in retrospect, that's exactly what I was doing. And then as I began to do my work and find my agency, all of my relationships started to renegotiate. And I could be, for example, with my father in a way which was very, and to this day, alhamdulillah, very adult, where we can both see each other. Obviously, there's that differential of respect. He's my father. Now I can actually appreciate that more. But there's also another level of, he's a human being and I'm a human being. We're both adults. And we can really access something more than we did when we were younger. And I find naturally wanting to, make him proud and, hear that, wanting him to hear that. And he is more able to give it to me. He's more able to say, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
And that means the world to me. And he would never say that. And if he did, I'm like, he's trying to get something out of me. I don't really believe that. Or whatever, like it wasn't receptive for either of us. We've both, I think, evolved. But it's in that exactly, Gabor Mate says that two core needs of the human being as children, and I would posit even to this day as adults and beyond, is attachment, connection, and authenticity, agency. And those two things don't go. So it's like going back and forth. It's like these two oscillations of contraction, expansion, Jalal, Jamal, yin, yang, whatever, to connect and to individuate. And you have to allow that child to do both, to have both a healthy connection and to let them go. Even I think it's Imam Ali's map of development for the child in the first 7 years of play. I find that so stunning. I mean, there's such hikmah there. Why are we not applying this? You don't see any. Anyways, I'll go on a whole thing there. 7 years of play until discernment. They're in Jannah. Leave them alone. There's no taklif, not even close to taklif, and they're just. That's how they learn. That's the mode of learning for them. It's experiential, it's imaginative, it's play-based. Let them go, play. 7 to 14, they're structure. Now bring in structure, left brain, goal. Discipline them in a beautiful way. But you've already established the unconditional love, the unconditional warm attention and concern that they feel in their bones. And so when you give them instruction, you don't need to be even forceful about it.
You don't need to socialize them. Like Gabor Mate says, you don't need to socialize your children. Make them feel like the attachment, and it's a natural thing for people to socialize because we need to fit in. But if you focus on the socialization, like you need to behave, you need to do this, you need to do that, then you actually they don't socialize because they have social anxiety, constantly being self-judgmental of their own behaviors and whether they're doing things right or wrong, or are they fitting in. I'm
totally convinced that behaviorism is a type of mechanization of psychology. It's like the same as like pathologizing disease and medicine. Behaviorism, that we have to just somehow get the behavior by any means necessary, break the child's will, torture them, discipline them, have them stand on one feet and do this and whatever, and just break them however you need to because the end goal is the behavior. And it's not the behavior. It's the connection that they have to their hearts and to those around them and to God and the livingness of that individual. That's the goal. That's the goal. And I always go back to it now after you shared it, Mu'adh bin Jabal's encounter with the Prophet ﷺ, wa radiyallahu anhu, when he was going to Yemen, and just that, I love that vignette. It's so beautiful to me because he's so nourishing. so nurturing and empowering of Sigma, you know. But going back just and then the 14 and up, just to finish that.
Yeah. Did you finish the Steiner points, the 4 points of Steiner?
I did, yeah. So you have physical, rhythmic, emotional, relational, and spiritual, ethic, moral.
Okay, right.
That's the 4, yeah. But and
then going back to Imam Ali.
This is how we do it, Sidi. And then Imam Ali, 14 and on, it's befriend them. Befriend the child, the parents to befriend them. They're mukallaf now. They're adult. They're legally bound. You've done your work. And say, Ya Allah, I've done what I had to do. They were yours from the beginning. I did my part. And now I'll just engage with them and be their counselor and be their supporter and their biggest fan and love them and give them what they need, but let them go and remove the pressure if they ever put pressure and the stress and the obligation and the expectation. No more of that if I put that on during the 7 to 14 year phase, because that won't help them anymore. They're beyond that. And that's why you keep doing that teenage. Why do teenagers become the teenage like this, they're like the superhuman or, beyond, subhuman kind of series of years of their life where, the teenage years, oh God, I have a teenager in the house and so on and so forth. Why do you treat them like that? It's because there's something in the house. There's a condition in the house, physical, rhythmic, mental, emotional, spiritual, or all the above, usually. That's off, and that child's responding to it. And it makes you feel a certain way. You call, teenagers, this and that. The teenager is a barometer. The child is a barometer of the health and the well-being of the environment. We all are. The adult is the barometer of the condition that he or she is in around them, the society, in the community, the corporation, or whatever system they're in. You have to always look at these things as features of the vital system, the vitality of the system speaking to you. And so at 14 years old, you should have done your job. And there's no shame here. I'm not trying to shame. We're speaking in principles and generalities here. So I'm not here trying to make people feel bad. I know you're not here doing that either. But this is just for information and for perspective, inshallah ta'ala, because these things are so important that we get them. These are critical components. And if I ever do a course on this, I want to reach the masses, not just the healthcare workers and whatever. I want the parents and the teachers to get this point. Because you have a tremendous influence over this generation and the generations to come by how you respond to children, what's your relationship to children, what's your relationship to their needs. It's so critical. We have to befriend, we have to be able to nurture, edify, structure, and then just befriend, and that's everything. And that's our tradition. So anyone that says anything else, I don't believe them. I just don't believe them. That's not our tradition at all. And it's nowhere to be found in the way of the Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You don't find that.
Well, does it work? I always bring it back to that. Yeah.
That's another level.
How's it working for you?
How's it working for you? I ask that question people individually. That's a good question to ask people that advocate for certain types of education and parenting too. How is it working for you? Yeah, it's a powerful question. I'm doing that. All right. So, any closing remarks for us before we?
Well, just for the takeaways, really about the I think really just explore your attention. Here's one that's very common is when you go and visit your folks. So for you especially for people that don't interact with their family that often, so they just see them on the holidays or once every month or whatever. When you go in there, just start noticing your attention, like as you go in, and almost having a bit of like allowance for what's happening to emerge. So, if you start to drift off or feel a bit intense in engagement with anybody, I'm just giving that as an example because that's very common. Just start almost tracking that and almost allowing yourself to the point where you say, I'm just going to go to the bathroom, if you need to just create space and then come back in. And when you feel intensity where you're almost, can you just come off like the muscles behind your eyes, around your brow? If you're like this, can you just almost let it come down? Can you soften the eyes? and almost create space. And if you are spacing out, that's feedback that you're being too intense. Something's too much for you. You can't fake that. You know, if that's happening, that's happening. You can't deny it. If someone's starting to space out, almost allow yourself just to take a little bit of distance, respect your organic responses to things. And what you'll find is if you learn to do that, and it takes a while to start to develop that, to be honest, especially in family, it's very, because we get really triggered around family often, is that what used to happen to me, because I used to go to my family and I used to put so much pressure on myself saying, I'm representing Islam here. I need to make sure that I don't say anything that they could misinterpret the religion, and they go away with like even greater misconceptions. I put all this pressure on me that when I left them, I was absolutely exhausted. You know, I'd go home and literally be out for hours. So that's a litmus test after engagement to see, where was your attention? Because if your attention was just intensity, spacing out, intensity, when you leave that engagement, you will need to recover. And what I found over the years, as I almost learned to work with this more and more, that when I go home, I will still feel a bit of tension, but it won't be to the degree that I used to have, where I'm almost out for the count for, sometimes it could be a few days just to recover. But now I've noticed is that I'm just a little bit more comfortable in my own skin. And I've got this almost ability to be fluid and move into engagements and come out of them without feeling hyper or without feeling spaced out, but rather I feel like I've still got energy available for myself. So playing around, attention's a major factor for this, is what a conversation about how to work with conserving energy. Is just noticing that spacing out, or noticing the intensity, and noticing when you actually feel quite available, and just playing around with that and exploring and sensing into that. And when you do that, you'll notice you'll have a lot more attention in your prayer. There's an availability, rather than this pressure we put on ourselves in prayer, that I need to get this done, or I need to have a perfect prayer. I need to be present for the whole prayer. You know, I'm gonna be present. You know, and I tell you, within a minute you'll be spacing out.
Am I present now? No, I'm not present the whole time.
And it's a natural process that just almost like it almost comes up like this and starts just moving around like the lava lamp behind me. There just feels this fluidity, and it's just no efforting there. It just feel like you're actually in relationship with someone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather than you trying to almost put that expectation on you and come out just feeling worse about yourself. And thus you'll feel less inspired to actually pray the prayer. So to play around with these things, that's my invitation.
Thank you for that.
No problem.
And we'll try to wrap it up for there.
So
please share any comments, feedback. We'd love to hear it. Otherwise, stay tuned. More to come.
And I hope you could all hear me clearer today.
Yes, hopefully. Even feedback on sound.
Give feedback on.
Thank you to our listener who pointed that out. Any future kind of feedback is welcome. Thank you, and
thank you very much, guys. Salam.